And we're back. Ari Aster coming up very shortly. Box office top 10, first of all, at 41. Little Richard, I Am Everything.
Which I thought was terrific. I mean, this is the Lisa Cortez documentary, which is not to be confused with the documentary which is currently on BBC iPlayer, which is Little Richard, King and Queen of Rock and Roll, with which there is some crossover. But I think this is a really fascinating portrait of a really brilliantly exciting, groundbreaking artist, and this looks at his career very much through kind of a queer theory lens, and and says, what if everyone just accepted that rock and roll was in fact created by a black queer icon, and what does that then tell us about the culture in which all that stuff happened? Also, it's just got loads and loads of fabulous fragments of interviews with Little Richard, who never appeared to do a boring interview. I mean, he was torn between rock and roll and religion, but every time he did an interview, he just went off on one.
Number 11 here and number 11 in the States, Big George Foreman, the miraculous story of the once and future heavyweight champion of the world.
Which, as we discovered last week, despite the fact that both you and I thought that we knew, a certain amount about boxing history, you said, I know about the Rumble in the Jungle, and then demonstrated that you didn't.
Correct.
Which, for me, watching this film, I didn't know any of this story at all. So every single match, I was like, is that how it finishes? I didn't know that.
Number 10 is Missing,
which I haven't seen.
Polite Society is at number 9.
So the best way of describing Polite Society is that it is a British satire, Bollywood fantasy, Asian martial arts heist movie with a science fiction Cronenbergian twist at the end and songs. And despite how chaotic that sounds, it's actually pretty good fun. And it's got a sort of anarchic, chaotic energy that I think works rather well. And I have thought about it a lot since I remember when I saw it. There were certain moments when I was going, what genre are we in now? Where is this film going to? So it pinballs all over the place, but it's very entertaining.
Number 9, so Daniel Savage on the number 9 movie, Polite Society, thoroughly enjoyed it. Full of charm, laughs and great stunts from start to finish. Gets a bit bonkers at the end.
A bit bonkers understates how bonkers it gets in the end.
But that's no bad thing. No. Thought Priya Kansara and Ritu Arya were superb.
Yeah.
Air is at number 8.
Well, I like Ben Affleck. I like Matt Damon. I'll say the same thing again. It's a story about licensing a shoe. I know other people have found more in it than that. I mean, whilst I was watching it, I was enjoying the sort of, the bromance conversations between these businessmen doing this stuff. But it's a story of a shoe.
Number 7 in the UK, number 4 in the States, Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, brackets 40th anniversary. This is an email from Elliot.
This re-release intended to make us all feel really old.
I just wanted to say that I was one of what I hope were many people getting to see Return of the Jedi on the big screen this weekend. I hope there were others, but the midday screening I popped into, Brixton's Ritzy, in the biggest room, had an audience of 1, which was me. How surreal to have a room that size to myself. It was possibly the best and most relaxing cinema experience I've ever had. I had no concerns about bad behaviour by other audience members. I was able to have exactly the seat I liked, and that no one else would be in it. It was a massive screen. I had no anxiety about my chocolate bar wrapper noise being too annoying for anyone. Also, it being Return of the Jedi, I had no anxieties about the characters on screen. About Jedi itself, a solid, very 80s action-adventure romp, elevated by the creature effects and Ian McDiarmid's Emperor more than anything else. The Ewoks look spectacular in some shots, but like children in suits in other shots. But hey-ho, being of a certain generation, the original Star Wars remains the only one I've not managed to see in the cinema now. Can any other listeners recount screenings attended where they were the only attendee? Okay, well, that's for future programs. But that would have been a great experience, particularly if you're anxious about other things that can happen. If it's just you, which you're used to, and I've done it as well, because you go to these screenings which are put on for you.
Yeah, there is the great privilege of going to the press screening. Can I just tell you the trivia thing about Return of the Jedi is that one of the people that George Lucas asked to direct it was David Lynch, and David Lynch tells this story about going out to George Lucas's ranch, and the Skywalker or whatever it's called, and when he got there, he immediately developed a migraine, and then for the whole of the meeting, when George was showing him all the characters and the toys and the Ewoks and something, David Lynch's migraine just got worse and worse and worse, and then he had to leave.
Yeah, I don't think that's a perfect combination.
It's a bunch of Muppets, isn't it? But
I remember queuing in there's a Starbucks near Broadcasting House, and
there is,
and I remember joining the queue, and 3 in front of me was Ian McDermott, who has such a distinctive profile, of course, because that's the profile is kind of what lets point, you know. Yeah. And the guy behind who was serving said name. And he could have had so much fun at that point, but he did just say Ian. I wanted him to do the full kind of emperor thing. Anyway, Star Wars is at 7. Number 6 is John Wick Chapter 4.
Which you and I both enjoyed very, very much. And that's a 3-hour movie that the time flies by.
Number 5 here, 6 in America, Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves.
Doing very, very well and good for it. So much more fun than we had any right to expect. So, yeah, really enjoyed it.
Ponniyin Selvan 2 is at number 4.
Haven't seen it because it wasn't press screen, but I imagine we may get some emails about it in the next week or so.
Well, I got one here, actually.
Oh, great. Brilliant.
From Ross. Dear Rocket and Raccoon, medium-term listener, first-time caller. South Asian cinema has been gaining a lot of international attention in the past few years, thanks to the incredible success of RRR, but also films like Gangubai Kathiawadi,
which is one of my favourite films of last year. Absolutely fantastic film, and one of the very few films to include a shot of a 1956 Dodge Coronet,
which I know Mark was a big
fan of.
And Pathan, which broke all sorts of box office records back in January. Ponniyin Selvan Parts 1 and 2 are of a different mould to all of those films, however, an epic 2-part Booker adaptation of one of India's most celebrated works of fiction. To say that these films are a triumph is a little bit of an understatement. It's wonderful to see such vision and style executed in a way that's equal parts exciting and complex. And director Mani Ratnam has outdone himself bringing this adaptation to life. It's not a surprise then, given that he's been trying to get this book adapted since as early as 1994, that the film seems so carefully planned. The cast also turn out excellent performances. Special mention going to Vikram and Aishwarya Rai Bachchan for one particular climactic moment in the film that I shall not spoil here. Needless to say, it's been one of the best times I've had at the movies this year, and that includes The Pope's Exorcist, although for entirely different reasons. If the duology needs summarising for the layman, then imagine a sort of Game of Thrones if it was Tamil originally and didn't have an ending so dire that it removed itself from the pop culture canon for a few years. This is very easy to recommend, provided that A, you've seen the first one, available on a streaming service near you, and B, can get over the fact it's not in English and therefore it's a little tricky to follow all the place names and character names as they are quite long. Up with the subtitles, down with people that don't like foreign films and all the other usual stuff from Ross. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I feel that my job has been done.
Box office number 3 here in America, not so. Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. Mohammed Shakir says, I watched Harold Fry yesterday expecting a more uplifting and upbeat film. Definitely far more complex than that, with wonderful central performances. Though it didn't meet my expectations, I still enjoyed it.
Didn't meet expectations in terms of what it was, as opposed to
what he was hoping for.
Okay,
maybe.
I mean, the Penelope Wilton interview is on the last podcast. Do listen to it because it's terrific. As is her further interview on Take 2, in which she sort of she answers questions unrelated to Harold Fry. I liked it. I mean, I was surprised by how much it stayed with me, because when you're watching it, it feels very kind of incidental, very kind of, light on its feet. And then later on, it's like, oh, okay, fine. It had stuck around with me.
Penelope Wilton, particularly interesting on filming in South Africa with Richard Attenborough. I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah.
Number 2 here and number 2 in the States, Evil Dead Rise.
Now, I promised I'd go and see it, and I was going to, but I didn't, because on the Tuesday morning that I was going to go and see it, you and I ended up watching 3 hours of Beau is Afraid. So I have seen The Pope's Exorcist, but that's now departed from the top 10, which is bizarre, because I thought,
what a success that was.
It's a Russell Crowe, Showgirls with Demons. Surely that's a smash hit.
Anyway, Jude has seen it. It says,
I'm looking forward to it.
As a massive Evil Dead fan, my favourite film of all time is Evil Dead 2.
Okay.
I was hesitant about Evil Dead Rise, especially as I wasn't the biggest fan of the 2013 remake by Fede Alvarez.
Yeah.
And I've always been worried about it if the franchise can survive without Bruce Campbell's Ash, given the 3 movies and a show, which is one of my favourite shows ever. However, Lee Cronin and co. completely proved me wrong. I loved Evil Dead Rise.
Yeah.
It's got the grittiness and the gore of the original 1981 film and the 2013 film, though not as violent, but still has some of the goofiness of ED2 and Army of Darkness, perfectly blending the two so as to keep me entertained. Thought the cast did a great job, especially Neil Fisher as Cassie, because I'm always surprised when a child actor does a great job. But Alyssa Sutherland deserves the biggest shout out for her performance as the deadite version of Ellie. She scared me no end. Lily Sullivan and the rest of the cast deserve their props too. Evil Dead can be such a physically taxing franchise, and they nailed what they needed to do. To sum it up, it showed up, impressed the hell out of me, and has become my favourite film of the year so far. Well, it has to be to make me send an email about it. Can't believe this was almost going to go straight to streaming, apparently, because it fully deserved the big screen release. Bring on the Ash, Mia, Beth crossover film. P.S. Hoping to see Mark back at Queen's Film Theatre this October.
We'll be back, absolutely.
From Jude. So it sounds as though you're going to enjoy it.
No, I am really looking forward to it. In fact, I've got, for reasons which I won't go into, I've got a costume fitting that I have to do this afternoon. And if I can get out of that early enough, I will go and see this evening because I am really excited.
Is it like a fancy dress costume?
It's a thing. I'll tell you about it another time.
Are you going to? Would you be recognized? Would we recognise you, or are you going to be? Like,
I hope so.
Is it cosplay?
It is cosplay. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, guess what? I'm going to a Comic-Con and I'm going to dress as my favourite character. I'm going to dress as Father Karras. Oh no, I do that anyway.
Okay, that's very good. And number one in the States, the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Yeah, we're again. Total amount of money at the moment.
Go on. What? On the
45, 780, 59.
You're just making numbers up now.
Read that figure out.
45,780,596 pounds.
It's an astonishing amount of money for a film which is very mediocre. I mean, fine, but very mediocre. And again, I would refer back to, Robbie Collin of This Parish made the same point. What that success tells you, there is a gaping hole in the market for kids' movies.
Thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed making it. While you're here, check out all the other videos because they're cool too, aren't they?
Yeah, and if you want to keep up to date with everything Kermode and Mayo's take, then check out our social channels.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
I mean, I would. I have done.
Excellent.